started. So, good afternoon, everyone. Good morning to some of you. Thank you so much for joining today's roundtable discussion. We're really excited that you can join us for this combination of Avaap, the Tambellini MGT Group, and Workday today are this conversation. So it's going to be an unscripted discussion. We are excited to have our two AI experts, Jeff Brown, who is Avaap's Vice President of Data and Analytics, and Dave Kieffer, Principal Analyst from the Tambellini Group, MGT. And we also have a special guest from Workday that I won't unveil just yet. But we're going to talk about a variety of different topics related to the hot topic, artificial intelligence. We're going to talk about what Tambellini is seeing in the marketplace versus what we're actually seeing on the ground. Low barrier, minimal investment ways to get started with AI at your institution. Where we're seeing AI, some of those investments actually pay off in higher ed, and other topics like AI governance. So to get started, I'll just do a quick introduction. My name is Amy Lahate. I lead Avaap's higher education sales team. I've been working with institutions over the past 25 years, helping them to select and implement and optimize ERP systems. I started my career in higher ed student services, spent about 14 years at a company called Ellucian, implementing SIS systems. And then I moved over to the Workday ecosystem in 2017, and I have not looked back since. So I'm going to turn it over to my partner in crime, Analyst Morrow, so she can introduce herself.
Thank you. Analyst Morrow, and I also have deep roots in higher education. I like to say I stopped counting at 29 years higher ed experience. And Dave and TJ and I were just reminiscing on what a small ecosystem this is. So I'm sure our paths have crossed, my path has crossed with many of you. Been a registrar, associate vice president for enrollment management, have been in the Workday ecosystem for over 10 years, and was at the first school to go live with Workday recruiting and admissions nearly a decade ago. So exciting to be able to talk with our thought leaders on AI, which is more than a buzzword now. I think most of it is our daily existence. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that. Amy, I'll turn it back over to you for a few more thoughts.
Sure thing. We'll just cover some housekeeping items. This session is going to be recorded, and we'll distribute it to any institution that registered for those who may not have been able to make it today. Probably will send out that link either tomorrow or by early next week. Just note that we do have participants muted just in terms of just being able to engage in the conversation, but we want you to be able to participate in the chat. So feel free to post questions throughout or comments in the chat, and our team will monitor those. And just finally want to thank our colleagues at Tambellini and Workday for co-sponsoring today's discussion. We can't do this without you. We appreciate the partnership and bringing us all together today. So before I pass it over to Analyst, I just want to give a quick 30-second overview of Avaap. For those of you who aren't familiar with us, we're a Workday certified implementation partner since 2016. If I move forward, this is a snapshot of some of the institutions we've worked with over the years, and you can see some of our Workday implementations in the middle. And then this is a high-level overview of the breadth and depth of Avaap services. So we don't just implement ERP. You can see some of the partners we work with on the right-hand side, especially in the data and analytics space. We have subspecialties, what we're talking about today, AI, business project readiness, change management services, and so on. I also wanted to mention that today's session is part of a broader roundtable series that we co-sponsor with Workday on a bi-monthly basis. And the roundtable discussions are focused on helping institutions evaluate, prepare, and become educated on what you need to do to successfully implement Workday. And we have many of those recordings available on our website. We're happy to share those with you. So we will include contact information in the webinar email follow-up should you be interested in learning more. And I think that's it on my end. I'm going to pass it over to you, Analyst.
All right, thank you. Well, let's meet our panelists. Jeff, we're going to go with you first. And would you give us your background, how long you've been with Avaap, and how you got interested in AI?
Sure. Thanks, Analyst. Yeah, my name is Jeff Brown, and I have been at Avaap, just hit my 19-year anniversary Started my career at Accenture before that. I've been in the data space for probably the last, 17 or so years. I started the data analytics and AI practice here at Avaap. And obviously a lot has changed over the years. We started out a lot of core data warehousing work, BI type reporting work, then kind of moved into the data lake era and more advanced analytics, and then obviously it's kind of landed us squarely in the AI era as well. So it's been a fun journey. I think all of those different eras have kind of built upon each other, and still plenty of great work to happen across each type of discipline in the data space. But excited to be talking to everyone about AI here today.
Thank you. Dave, why don't you introduce yourself? I know you have deep background in higher education also. And for those who may not be familiar with the Tambellini Group and what you all do, would you please share a little bit about that too, please?
Absolutely. Thanks, Alia. Hi, I'm Dave Kieffer. I'm a principal analyst here at the Tambellini Group. I've been here about 6 years, working in the industry, and we work across the industry as an analyst firm. So we're doing primary research and publications on products and services in the higher ed space, as well as do advisory work with institutions to help them through their technology challenges and their strategic challenges across institutions. Before that, I was at Ohio State. I retired from Ohio State in 2019, where I led our enterprise applications practice. And so over the course of those 30 years, plus my student time, so I'm now at 40 years in higher ed tech, um, did everything from mainframe programming to implementing PeopleSoft to doing data warehouses to starting down the Workday path when we were at Ohio State. So um, I think that through line is really interesting as we look at AI, and I'm sure that'll come up in our discussion today.
Yeah, yeah. And we're finished with the deck, so we can take that down. I want to focus on your faces. And TJ, I know that we've invited you as a special guest, and we may go to some questions for you at the end for Workday, but I would love for you to share your background and introduce yourself too before we get started.
Sure. Well, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. Excited to be here to add to the conversation. My name is TJ Rains. I serve as Managing Director for Higher Education at Workday. And I've been in the higher education ecosystem for 25 years. I've served in both public and private institutions as Chief Transformation Officer, Chief Information Officer, VP. And so I have a lot of experience in implementing a multitude of ERP solutions over the years in different contexts. And really what we're seeing now is this new evolution of capabilities with AI. So I'm super excited to be here, and thank you for having me.
Thank you. We are excited to have you. And I think you worded it well, the new capabilities, the new evolution of AI. So, Jeff, before we start with questions, I want to lay the groundwork on what AI is and why right now there is that feeling of such a buzzword around it and why it's different than it has been in the past.
Sure. Yeah. So, I like to level set. AI is really about predictions. That's really at its core. And if you think about it, I know everyone's talking about LLMs and things like that. It's obviously predicting what question you're asking. It's predicting how you speak the English language, right? And so that's kind of the parallel there. But it's really all about predictions. There's a lot of AI is really the overarching umbrella of trying to get machines, computers, obviously, to think and act like we as humans can. And so then there's a lot of sort of sub techniques within there. Again, I'm just trying to kind of do the glossary of terms here for a minute. You've got machine learning, which is where computers are learning based off of data that they're being fed in, and they make different decisions and predictions, recommendations the next time based off of what they've learned over the course. You've got the large language models, which obviously have really come into the market in the last several years. Those are the ones that are, sort of able to speak English and be able to generate content based off of their ability to speak English and, create content, like I said, coming out of that. You've got things like agentic AI, which is really creating AI solutions that really act as employees, right? So that's where you see things like the employee system of record, where really that agent is acting as an employee within your organization. Just like any employee, they're allowed to do certain things and they're not allowed to do certain things, right? And it's setting up all those guardrails, but it's really the agentic side, obviously, where people are talking a lot now, is really that, AI kind of acting as an employee or acting as a human with the same types of boundaries that you would put around a human.
Thank you. So when we think about those boundaries and enhancing the work, it's probably quite a period of time before we can replace people. So that's certainly not our focus. We value our people in higher education. But Dave, what are you seeing as far as the conversation with a lot of higher education institutions and where they feel AI can have the biggest value in the short term?
It's a tough question, because there's a lot of hype, there's a lot of activity, but finding institutions who have measurable value from the tools is still at a pretty low level. So I would say think about a couple of layers, right? The first layer being institutions have taken things like Copilot, and given folks access to Gen AI to use in their daily tasks. It's a pretty base level of using the tool sets. And I think we're seeing individual value, but not institutional value yet in those implementations of, here, let's let the tool loose. And maybe not quite as high a level as folks expected when they started to use the tool. I will say the last 6 months, those tool sets have advanced their functionality significantly by implementing agentic AI in those interfaces to where they can do much more than they could do at the beginning of this calendar year even. So the acceleration is pretty intense. The second way is related to what Workday is doing, which is bringing AI out through products in a gated, controlled way on a gated, controlled data set, to do specific tasks. So when we talk about the fear, uncertainty, and doubt in the marketplace around AI and hallucination and model drift and all these things, a lot of those risks are reduced significantly in the kind of application surfaced AI that we're starting to see mature in the market. I think a year ago we were talking about Gen AI surfaced in those tools, which was of some use, but the agentic AI, I think, has much higher ceiling, and is even more controlled in a lot of ways based on what we're seeing start to come to the market. For the first time this year, I talked to a higher ed CIO who said, I'm going to implement agentic AI as I implement my new ERP solution, because it should affect my process design, right? So this is new. It has been, I'm going to get my systems up and running, and then I'll think about this cool AI thing that's an add-on. But now we're starting to see people take it more seriously in the sense that it can be a part of a process design. I think there's still some risk to that because I think it's still early, even with all the agentic AI rolling out right now. It's all still pretty new. And my advice on that side would be have a backup plan if that doesn't work out. Always know where the process is going to land if you don't have that. But I think folks are starting to consider, even in higher ed, relying on those things. The third place is really in this small minority of very advanced institutions who are developing AI on their own, either through creating local models and doing things, or starting to experiment with some of these tools on top of their own data. I don't think that's in the cards for most institutions. I think most institutions need productized AI to succeed in the short term. And I think that's where we'll start to see the most pickup in the next 12 months, is starting to adopt things in tools they already own.
Yeah. We are having a lot of those conversations internally as well. Jeff and I, it's part of our regular day. And Jeff, knowing the technology has enhanced significantly in the last 6 months, as Dave said, what are some things that you and your team are working on to be within apps or productized that, and where do you think people think it's there, but it's not ready yet? Because I know we've had conversations about that also.
Yeah. And I think Dave did a really good job of kind of articulating that, kind of in the ERP and like something like Workday, where they have a very gated, data and, strong business processes. I think you're getting, there is inherently sort of a lot of reliability and trust that can be built into AI there. I think a lot of what my practice does, we are working on kind of the because the product already does that, right? And so we need to work on kind of these other things, be that agentic hook-ins with other applications, be that really advanced AI type things that require other data sources, things like that. I think there's a couple things here. I think one is really needing to be cognizant of the level of autonomy that you give an AI agent at this point, right? Especially when you're in kind of a custom world, you're on your own at that point, right? And I think that's where like assist is like a great way to start, right? If people had the information that they needed to make the decision, it was all there for them. It had been, generated for them, but they're still making the decision. They're just making a more educated decision because they have more information around it, right? So you're kind of reducing the risk because you have the human in the loop at that point to still make the decisions. And as you get more confidence in what it's producing, then that allows you to kind of, potentially make things a little bit more autonomous. Yeah, I mean, from a technology landscape perspective, it's definitely changing rapidly. I mean, we have had projects that were relatively short projects, and by the time we delivered the project, we would have, from a technology perspective, probably would have thought about it a whole lot differently, just because within specific products or obviously new products coming on the market, there's just a lot changing there. I think one of the big principles there is trying to keep a composable architecture. So you have components that do different things. And then, if someone is innovating particularly well, or you need to add new componentry because you want to take advantage of something, you can do that without kind of like going back to the drawing board. And I foresee that happening for, quite some time at this point, because it's going to be an area of a lot of innovation. And so the better you can kind of create composable or compartmentalized architecture components to take advantage of the latest stuff, but not kind of having to re-architect constantly is really a good practice to be in.
Is
Can I
there
ask a quick
something?
follow-up, Analyst?
Yes.
I'm really curious, Jeff, is what you're seeing in this custom arena, how much it's domain driven. And what do I mean by that? If you're working in finance, predictability is a lot higher because you're dealing with numbers. If you're dealing in HR, it's less predictable because there's a lot more human. If you're dealing in student, it's even less predictable, and I feel like higher risk because the further you get out there. Are you seeing folks' appetite closer to the finance side of the house where it's a little more predictable and I can trust numbers, as opposed to getting into student advising, which is maybe the most risky thing we can do with these tools right now, given model drift and all the the crazy things we're seeing in some of these models in the wild?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I think, one of the biggest things I think everyone needs to think about when they think about AI opportunities is AI is inherently probabilistic, right? And so whereas, relational databases, everything that we're kind of business, logic driven business processes that computers run are deterministic, right? So having AI post your general ledger entries, that's not happening anytime soon. You want hard controls around that.
Yeah.
And then I think when you get into that probabilistic area, you have to accept and understand the amount of risk that's coming into that level of probability, right? And so I think it varies a little bit, Dave. I think this is where assist is like a very good place to be right now, because you have so much less, there's tolerance for risk because the human is still making those decisions.
Yeah.
I do think in some of those HR and finance and student areas, there is a lot of opportunity to bring lots of different data sources together, particularly on the student side. And that's where, AI can be really helpful, because otherwise, like building logic across many, many, many sources can be challenging to do. But at the same time, you've got to understand what the risk is related to what you just created.
And
Right.
I think because summarization is something that it's really good at and is less risky than prediction. I talked to an institution this morning using an MCP model to do exactly that, go after well-curated student data sets and come up with outputs from an analytics perspective. Super interesting use case, less risky than predictive work that you would do in that student space, right?
Right.
Summarization, it's pretty darn good at.
Right.
Yep.
Right. I know that TJ, this is a natural place to talk about what Workday is doing because I know that you are being very intentional in how you add AI agents or assistants to the platform, but this isn't by the same token, this is just an evolution of what Workday's been doing for quite a while. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you've been doing and what's on the roadmap?
Yeah, indeed. AI is nothing new to Workday. We've been in this space for a very long time. First ML capabilities were launched around 2015 and continued to build upon that structure. But at the core, Workday has built in the capability for extendability as well. But right now, I like the conversation around Assist. I think Assist is definitely the area of focus that many institutions are seeing right now. And Workday is providing significant co-pilot type experiences to help humans in the natural flow of their work, right? And another thing to keep in mind too, with the Workday Illuminate artificial intelligence strategy, we do focus on three key areas: accelerate, and that's where you saw a lot of the generative AI integrations into the product around, helping build out position descriptions and whatnot. Those are very helpful in terms of achieving micro efficiencies that do. They come together to create true efficiencies for an organization, but it's at an individualized level, right? Assist is bringing it to a deeper level, as we talked about, and then transform is really where the agentic AI strategy comes into play. And Workday is also, we have a agentic system of record strategy where we're focused on being the system of record for all agents that interact within Workday and outside of Workday. So that we're very, very close to we are directly aligned with the standards that are used for agent development across the board. We know that we're not the only organization building agentic capabilities, but we are doing it in a very responsible way, in a value-oriented way as well.
I couldn't have paid you to lead me right to my next question better because I wanted to talk about responsible AI. I promise I did not send him that. But I want to talk about responsible AI because, Dave, you talked about how the CIO wants to start doing AI with their deployment. What is the way that you're seeing institutions talk about governance and the best way to start things and what to put together and what they should wait on? And then, of course, how to make sure that what they're getting out is true data that they should make actionable.
So my observation is that AI governance on most campuses is focused on classroom, focused on students and how to introduce these technologies to students in a way that helps educate them on, we've seen this shift from academia where we don't like this at all to we need to teach students how to use this responsibly and incorporate it into our pedagogy. I think that is a fantastic turn to figure out how to have students learn to use these things correctly or wisely, I'll say. We use ethically a lot, and I think that makes a lot of sense. So we've seen the biggest focus there. On the flip side, I would say if we look at the enterprise side of the house, if we look at the business side of the house, we've seen less of it. Some folks equating it to application governance. And I want to highlight why I think folks should be thinking much more deeply about this. When we've talked about application governance over the years, we've talked about, oh, I want to buy this application to do this very deterministic thing, right? And that is not what these tools do. And so we have to think about governance in the long term. I mentioned model drift before. I'm gonna buy this application or this AI capability. What it does today, to Jeff's earlier point, is not necessarily what it will do 6 months from now. And so I have to have a strategy to do constant monitoring of the tool sets. That's kind of what governance, I think, should be looking like. I don't know that we're seeing a lot of it yet in higher ed, but I think as folks get acclimated to what the tools can do and have more of them coming on campus and being sent off campus. Some sort of more consistent way of looking at these, monitoring them, and ensuring that the outcomes are still appropriate over time, especially when models are changing this fast and tools are changing this fast, I think is a really important thing to be thinking about.
I agree. And Jeff, we've talked about how there are people building their own AI models in silos, and governance becomes even more important when they're using that data to make decisions on that something that may not be governed. What are you seeing from the technical infrastructure standpoint that folks should keep in mind regarding governance?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, the data are very important. And kind of the parallel I always draw is if your data is wrong in a dashboard, everybody knows it, right? And it's obvious to them that's not how many students we have, that's not how much, revenue we had or whatever, right? It's a very apparent when AI, if your data that's feeding the AI is not correct, it's not super easy to know that. Because you've been obfuscated from the logic around it and even the answers in some ways. So I think that is a key piece. You've got to understand these data sources, and kind of when we talked about from a research perspective that I think a lot of us use on a daily basis, right? That becomes important. But I think anytime that we're doing, as far as the data quality goes, it's important. But I think any one of us that uses for research, and hopefully generally with AI, like we're then applying our own knowledge and augmenting it, or getting assistance from that research. So if you apply that into the business context, that's a whole lot different, right? And so we really need to make sure that the data, particularly, you can use the general purpose LLMs and things like that, but what you're adding in from your institution, what they call RAG, right? Your specific data becomes very important, and you have to make sure you understand, the quality of that data, any biases that are in that data, which then draws you into the business processes, right, that generate that data. So all of that stuff becomes very important. And then Dave kind of hit on this a little bit too from the when he was talking about governance is your development process just becomes a little different. It becomes easier in a lot of ways, right? Because things are assisted by AI, and there's things you can use out in the market that can kind of get you further. But you're to sort of like build the initial product, but then you need to build all the governance controls around it. Like, whose job is it to make sure this thing's being accurate? How do I create reporting and things like that so that folks can easily monitor the quality of what the AI is generating? How do I get feedback on it? How do I constrain the AI model through things like business process to only do what we trust that it's able to do? And that can vary dramatically, right? If it's something's going to be right 50% of the time versus something that's correct, which you can figure out to be 80% of the time, like people need to be working with those two solutions very differently.
Yeah.
And I think this comes back to the people question that we hear a lot. So let's look at the model of application development. Co-pilots can write a lot of pretty accurate code, but it takes an experienced developer to know what's not good and how to refine that code to be really good. In the business sense, in the student sense, it's the same thing, right? How do you develop knowledgeable people in those domains to see what work the AI is doing and validate whether it's good or not if there are never any junior people in that field, right? So I think we really need to think about our people strategy around these things, so that we don't end up removing all the junior people out of a function to have the senior person retire and only rely on the AI after that, right?
Yeah.
So we have to think about succession planning. We need to think about building up teams over time to use these tools intelligently. And I think a lot of folks are missing that part. They're looking for, I can get an efficiency, which means maybe I could do with this many less people, as opposed to I could get this efficiency and those people could do this much more with the tool sets.
So I'm hearing a theme of strategy before you start installing apps and connecting apps, and governance as important foundation pieces for you to start using these things. I think that some people are still sort of not sure of what AI can do and what might be some use cases for them to use it. Jeff, I'll start with you. Let's look at the student data in particular. I know we said it's one of the hardest, but they're going to expect it. We know that as consumers, they have higher expectations and faster expectations than some other groups. So where do you think are some good opportunities for institutions to think about AI?
Yeah, I think student success, student retention, and I think those are two key areas. Um, and partly why I think they're very good candidates early on is a lot of that is more traditional, these types of use cases can benefit from more traditional machine learning, where you can really, feed it very specific data and everyone can kind of understand what's going into that model and therefore what I should do about it. So I think that's a very help, and it's just it's helping to identify the needle in the haystack a little bit more completely through data. Again, the actions and what you're going to do about it still need human knowledge and what this means, but it can kind of point you to some challenges or some opportunities, I guess, that you may not have just noticed by your answers somewhere on this dashboard, right? I think in like the student knowledge and kind of learning space, obviously that benefits a lot from Gen AI, but you certainly get into what Dave talked about earlier, right? Is teaching these students how to use it responsibly. I think it's great when folks get information very quickly, but like we're not talking about it writing papers for us. We're maybe talking about it to help us get over writer's block for a second, right? And so there's great opportunities. Obviously, an area that needs a lot flushed out from a responsible use perspective, especially in the education space.
Yeah, and I know with retention and student success, we've talked about pulling data sources from many different areas, LMS and your tutoring system and Maxi and all of those things, in addition to the ERP and student information system. So pulling all of that together to get a different picture can be helpful. Dave, are there some use cases that you've heard lately that you're seeing good possibility for in the new future?
Well, I think I want to go back to one that Jeff mentioned real quickly in student success, because I think it's high opportunity and high risk depending on how we use it in that space, because models do drift. And frankly, if we think about the ML model you would have used 5 years ago for students, it wouldn't work today because the risks are different, right? We have to be able to figure out how these things move with the industry and with where students are for them to work. The flip side of that is I'll go back to summarization, which is again something I think these tools do really, really well. If you've got quality data, to go back to Jeff's point. So if there's a preparatory conversation to have, do we have data that's high quality enough to point anything at from an automation perspective, including AI? But I think getting a sense of where students are, pulling all this student success data together to summarize it from an advising perspective and an intervention perspective, I think can be hugely valuable, happen much faster than we can do it with traditional methods today. So I'm very high on that. I do think that the early agentic use cases of transparently, and I'm going to go back to what TJ said, transparently automating some of these processes so a user can see what's happening and control it, have great efficiency possibilities in the near future, because some of these are relatively rote processes that an agentic solution can figure out, and a user can correct very quickly if it's going down the wrong path before something happens. I think I have really high interest to see those take off, because I think on the kind of the administrative or efficiency side of the house, I think there's a ton of gain to happen, especially when institutions are so constrained on people right now.
Yeah, I want to talk about some of those efficiencies. Like I got excited because I was on a client side and a Workday solution architect was talking about Workday looking at invoices and determining, scanning the invoice to determine who the payee was and helping with the manual entry there. TJ, focusing on the student experience, what do you see is coming near term in the roadmap where we can either help administrators make better decisions or help the student have a better experience through AI?
Yeah, there's a lot of capabilities exist in the product set today across the board, from financials, HCM, and into student. But those examples and use cases are really centered on creating those individualized efficiencies around business processes. So, a good example would be automating the tagging of specific types of expenses and whatnot as they're entered, which is going to shave time off of individual task loads and whatnot.
Yeah.
But when it comes to student, I mean, we are investing heavily in looking at ways to automate, practices and processes, but also the core is we're focusing on agentic AI to really help drive efficiencies at a level that we've just never encountered due to the limitations of past technology stacks and whatnot. So I mean, what I really see as coming down the pipe is just a swing of agentic support services to really drive efficiencies at organizations, keeping the human in the loop, right? I want to go back to that because I think that's an important part of this. We have to have controls in place to ensure that automation at this level, agentic automation is new. These are reasoning machines, right? And so we have to have the adequate controls in place to ensure that they are completing the work that they've been assigned based upon their defined security roles, based upon the expectations for the work to be carried out by those agents. And that's applicable across the board, across HCM, finance, student, and others. So there's a lot of great work that's happening in that space right now. We have a team that is basically a agent factory right now, working with our customers to define use cases that are truly impactful to their day-to-day work. And then we are working to build those, test in a very responsible way. And that's baked into our approach. We want to ensure that what we're delivering has true value to our customers in the field.
It's exciting. It's hard to envision what that's going to look like even 6 months from now, as we couldn't 6 months before. But I'm excited to see what that looks like. For those, we talked about setting the strategy first, we talked about governance. If someone feels like they have that in place, what's you think the quickest win to use AI, Jeff, technology-wise?
Yeah, I think there's this big angle with experimentation, and again, I'm talking sort of outside the context of the Workday platform because Workday does a great job of building that stuff for you. But if we're kind of out in the custom world, you're going to have to experiment. And I always like something that we kind of already know the answer to, and then figure out if AI can get us to that answer. And I think through that process, again, from the technology perspective, it's getting some understanding of what technology would I need to deploy this type of AI solution. So you can kind of get that, kind of ease into it and kind of understand the landscape of what you might need. And then from there, right, if you are able to kind of work yourself through that process, again, you want to have something that's like valuable, but I wouldn't suggest starting with something that's really, really difficult because everyone's just going to get really frustrated by the whole process. They're going to get disappointed. It's going to set you back in the AI space for a while.
Yeah.
So I'd start with something relatively simple that you can kind of start getting the technology stack, understanding how you need to organize your teams, organize your delivery of those type solutions, get the users involved, right? So they start understanding better how they should be interacting with AI. And then you can kind of figure out how can we scale it from there, right? There's other use cases that are kind of like this, have good value. That would be a good follow-on, right? Or, we've got something that's a little bit different, but we've kind of figured out this part of what that solution could look like. So then that use case that's a bit different, right? We're kind of just working on the incremental difference with the longer term solution. So there is this idea of experimentation. I think that's very important here. I think if you're working with your leaders, promising ROI, promising timelines, promising costs are going to leave everyone really disappointed. Now, once you kind of get your groundwork laid, of course, then, those expectations will start coming at that point. But some of your first forays into it, like people need to kind of get comfortable with the thought that this is as much of an experiment as anything else.
Yeah. And Dave, going back to what you said, some organizations just may not be staffed or have that capability to take the risk or the cost or the time to do it themselves. So I heard you say maybe starting with some of those off-the-shelf products or apps. Any of those ideas that you're seeing take hold and getting interest in recent months?
I think it's still pretty slow. We have a pretty hesitant culture in general in higher ed. I think that we'll see more. Frankly, I think, again, a year ago, we were talking about Gen AI use cases, which are a relatively low bar until we see more of the agentic work happen in these applications, a little bit more in production and in real use cases. I think higher ed will start to adopt, but I think the same notion goes to what Jeff said, which is which of these looks like they have high ROI, and let's experiment with it. Let's not put all our eggs in this basket and promise that this is going to solve our problems until we try it out and test it. Um, I want to add something to that, though, which is, and I know I mentioned this before, but both in the custom world and in the application world, if you're going to use these technologies, you need to build yourselves an ecosystem that's going to continually validate that these are producing results that are acceptable to you and that they haven't drifted away in some way that is going to cause you significant risk. And I think that's definitely it's more the case in the custom side of the house, as I'm sure Jeff would attest to, than it is on a productized set where there are maybe thousands or hundreds of thousands of people using it who are going to inform folks if it's drifting away. But when you're on your own, I think that experimentation and that regular sniff test back to see if these things are still working and whether they need to be tweaked is an important way to think about productionizing something, scaling it, maintaining it, and it's going to take more eye on maintenance, at least for the foreseeable future, than a typical deterministic application would take.
Yes, that validation is crucial. But I also want to think about the communication side. So TJ, we talked about how this is not a new space, even though AI is a buzzword right now. This isn't a new space for Workday. And especially those that are already live on Workday, they may have the perception around the organization that they don't have AI yet. How would someone start that conversation and start to introduce that this is an evolution of the technology and not like a switch where we're starting and we haven't before, that this really is just an evolution of technology and leveraging what it can do at that time?
Yeah, from a Workday perspective, regarding available ML and AI capabilities today, I would suggest folks go to community and do some research on the capabilities that are available today. What we do at Workday with our AI capabilities is that they have to be switched on deliberately, right? So the human is in the loop, even at that level, right? So look at all the features that are available to you under your current contracted situation, and you can begin experimenting in test environments and see how they're functioning. These are tried and true capabilities, but there are also some. I want to jump into the custom development world a little bit too, because recently, Workday continues to build strong relationships with our partners. AWS is an amazing partner with Workday, and we have integrated their AI stack into our Extend platform, which allows institutions to make use of AI capabilities that are ever increasing in terms of the available resources from AWS and others into their built-on Workday experiences. And we have seen customers making some tremendous improvements. We talked about the need for student success and intervention management. That is a use case that folks are really driving forward, but they're still utilizing deterministic methods. But with this new integration, this integration over to AWS, you have the ability to leverage those capabilities with that deterministic data to develop something new, something fresh, intervention guidance, something of that nature. There's a lot of use cases that are coming out really based upon supporting students and being successful in their day-to-day work and progression towards their degree.
We had a question come in that I think is this a great place to take that question. And Jeff, I'll go to you for this. We've talked a lot internally on how we protect data, and we have a question on how concerned folks should be loading with HIPAA and FERPA and other protected information. Is it safe to train the AIs? How do they think about that to make sure that they're not exposing sensitive data and sharing that into the open AI world?
So the easy answer to this question is, should you be concerned? The answer is yes. Now, the nice follow on to that is there are definitely good techniques that can protect your data. So, using your FERPA HIPAA data to train a model that others might use, like, definitely not a good idea. But there's ways that you can use train models, right? Because the train model, like, doesn't really change. That's what it's been trained on, right? So you can feed FERPA or HIPAA data into a trained model. That's different than training the model off of that data. And so you have to think about and make sure you're absolutely thinking about security all through this process. So shorter answer is, should you be concerned? I would say you should definitely be very mindful of that, but there are definitely techniques and ways that you can architect solutions that absolutely protect the data.
And as part of the strategy and governance, I would assume that as starting this, you certainly would want to have a policy that someone should not use a free ChatGPT account to be having conversations about students. Anything that is going to be used needs to be discussed and in a protected environment.
Yes.
Dave, other considerations there about protecting data and concerns that you're hearing from institutions?
I think there's a general wariness, but I would take it one step further, and it goes all the way back to whatever the contract or user agreement license is, and have legal review those. It's painful to do it, but you have to know what you're dealing with at a baseline level, and the contract that you're under is the baseline level. The technology itself, to Jeff's point, you have to validate as well. But I think it's really important to do just baseline governance things when you're dealing with student data or HIPAA data or any PII. Do your homework, do your due diligence. Don't just jump on a tool on the internet and try something out. We all know that's not okay. I think we learned that in the initial cloud bubble, where people went and licensed applications and put student data in them, and hopefully we've learned those lessons here. But I think that due diligence, it's only going to take one mistake for your institution to be really embarrassed or worse. And so, following that guidance and making sure you're including the right folks in your decision process is really critical.
Including the right folks, I'm going to go back to what you said earlier about making sure that you keep those junior resources around. Vanessa and I, who's our marketing team, we actually presented on leadership among the generations and how different generations bring so much to the table. And we've certainly, the younger generation that has grown up with technology, they're going to have many of them, not that we older ones don't have enthusiasm, but they're going to have a different skill set, those junior resources, and leveraging them to help bring these emerging technologies forward, I think may give them an opportunity to shine a little bit as well. Do you see that being an intentional way that institutions can not just teach things to their students, but pull them into the activities to help their organization grow?
100%. I'm going to jump in on this one because I feel pretty strongly from this. For folks who have worked with me over the years, never bring somebody onto a team you're not willing to listen to. I don't care what their experience level is. And I think with this kind of technology, we have folks who might come in as some freshman student intern who have more experience than anybody in the office on this. So if somebody's on the team, they're part of the team and you listen to them. And I think this is one of those times when that's going to pay off in spades because, we talked about experimentation. So you're going to begin experimentation with a set of data and a set of tools. Someone's going to think of a use case that no one's ever thought before.
Yeah.
Right. Someone in the room is going to go, wait a minute, what if we did X? And until those folks are in the room, you won't know what they might come up with that is the use case that blows them all away for you. So I think that kind of inclusion is really important. And this is a great time to bring students into your teams to help you.
Yeah.
And so when I say junior, that can sound really negative, but that doesn't mean that person has deep experience in the process you're trying to execute and they need help with that. But you pair those two things up together, it can be really powerful.
Yeah. Jeff, I know that you've had some excellent results by letting your I don't want to say younger, but your more junior consultants sort of run with their ideas and try, and I know you like to say fail fast. How have you encouraged them to take the risks and try the things?
To be honest, I think it just goes back to what Dave just said, which is the the great thing is AI is a great enabler to be able to solve problems. And so then the paradigm kind of shifts to who can come up with the most pressing and most difficult problems that need to be solved. That can come from anywhere in your organization, right? So it's really who has the best idea, not to say we need to forget about all this stuff we talked about earlier about risk and security and all that stuff absolutely needs to be in there. But, I think with the use of AI, it's really the opportunity is really who can figure out the great problems that AI can help benefit from. And that, it can come from people with years of experience in the institution. It could come from a junior person who's been working with AI their whole life and kind of understands the type of things that it can do.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask you to summarize, what do you think will be the buzzword in AI, or where we are? And I'm not going to say 6 months. I'm going to give it a whole year. Can
That's
we?
way too long.
Okay, so okay,
I'm
maybe
just
it is
kidding.
6 months. It does change so fast. But where do you think that we're going to be? Because I don't think that we could have. I couldn't. I know Jeff could, but I couldn't have foreseen where we would be 6 months ago. So I'll let you decide. 6 months or a year. What do you think the buzzword and the buzz thing with AI is going to be then? I'll go with Jeff first.
I mean, I still do think it's going to be in that agent space. I think it's going to be more that maybe folks have picked up the pace a little bit there. So they understand, like, maybe they've seen some success and now they're really thinking in terms of what are those annoying things that I have to do? What are the swivel chair things? What are the integrations that could have gotten built but didn't, and I just have this nuisance part in my job, or I just like to get information delivered to me that will help me make decisions, right? Those types, I think it's still going to be in that agent area. I just think we're going to see pace and different problems starting to be solved than what we're seeing today. I mean, to Dave's point, it's been a little slow so far because I think there's a lot to figure out there.
Yeah, yeah. All right, Dave, you think higher ed's going to jump in more, and what are we going to see in 6 months or a year?
Well, I certainly think higher ed's going to jump in more. So we're always going to lag, and I think that's okay in a lot of cases because of the business that we're in.
Mhm.
I think across AI, so we've heard a couple of senior folks in some of these tech companies say the end of ERP is coming, right? You don't need ERP anymore because AI can do everything, which is bunk in its own way, right? Because transactional stuff has to exist. Um, but how people interact with that for many kinds of user populations could go away, right? How do you interact with dashboards and analytics if you have an AI that knows your data and can summarize it based on what you ask it? So beyond what we think of as natural language processing, but really into this interactive exploration of data for all sorts of purposes, whether it's a student looking at their own academic record or a provost looking at what are the best programs for us to offer. I think that user interface layer for many use cases could go outside of transactional systems and into these sorts of technologies because we're seeing it happen already. Um, think about how you search the web today. How
Yeah,
often do you go to Google and search the web as opposed to go to one of the Gen AIs that's connected to the web to get you a better view of that information. Now, sometimes you want the website, you don't want that, but in many cases, that agentic front end on the web has already changed how we think about it. So applying that to the work that we do every day doesn't seem much of a stretch. I don't think it's as far off as people expect.
yeah. All right, TJ, I'm going to give you the last word on this. So don't ever say I didn't give you the last word. Where do you think we are? Where do you think we are in 6 months or a year on
Yeah,
AI?
I think in 6 months you're gonna see a lot of adoption of productized agentic AI, which is very controlled environments, and the security and the role and the specific task execution strategy for each one of those agents will be defined, configurable to a certain degree, and that allows for a bit of experimentation without customization. But what I think we'll start seeing between that 6 months to a year is you're going to see interoperable agentic AI opportunities crop up where agents will be working in concert to deliver key results. Now, the variety of different use cases can come through that, but in essence, interoperability has to be a key concern that we have to focus on moving forward, because we're about ready to see a lot of agents entering into the market to do a lot of different things and different systems, and we need to ensure that they're doing it in a way that is well-defined, secure, and overall we're doing it in a responsible way. So I think you're going to see agentic AI just kind of come in first productized, and then you're going to start seeing it move in the direction of having interoperable agents between vendor offerings and independent vendor offerings as well. Some institutions are building their own agentic core right now, and they're on the edge, but it's definitely something that's coming.
I can't wait. I'm so excited. I just find AI and the capabilities so exciting with, it's not Jetsons quite, but it's still very exciting to see where we can be in a very short period of time. It has been my pleasure to spend time with the three of you and chat with you, and we could go on for so much longer. I have so many more questions, but I know that you have connections with many of the folks on the webinar, and they know how to reach out to you, or they can reach out to Avaap to ask deeper questions. So thank you so much for your time. We wanted to also let our attendees know that we are having another webinar next Thursday at the same time with one of our partners, Lambent Technology, to talk about possible revenue opportunity, efficiency with space utilization, and some ways that you can think about how to look at that data. And then Jeff's also going to talk to us about how we can use AI, again, to connect the information and get more insights from that data. So we encourage you to please join us. Thank you, Alana, for putting the link in the chat. Thank you again, gentlemen, for being with me. Appreciate your time, and everyone have a great day.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.